Hey Hylians! So, a new trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has been revealed, showing the most new footage in quite a while. We get a really good look at Ganondorf and his impact on the world, the monsters, the sky, and much more. It really is a fantastic trailer, and if you somehow have not seen it yet, I recommend watching it for yourself before this video. With the last couple of trailers, I did analysis videos going through every little frame and detail within them, and so it only feels right to do the same again with this one. So let's not waste any more time and get started right away, because this video is going to be long. The trailer begins looking out over Hyrule Field. Thunder, lightning and rain covering the screen, perfectly setting the mood for this trailer. While it is dark, we can see a handful of interesting points dotted around the land. In the back we can see Death Mountain, with what looks to be malice spewing out of the summit. We could also see this a little in the last trailer. Closer to us we can see what looks to be a pool of malice on the ground. Looking closely you can even see it moving, much like how the malice moved in Breath of the Wild. Along with the malice, dotted around the shot are 3 green spirals. We've seen these briefly before. There's one in the very front of the shot, one on the far left, and one way in the back on the far right. At first I thought it could just be rain, but no, that definitely is another whirlwind. The next shot gives us a much closer look at an enemy first shown off in the last trailer, though only from afar. Now we get a much better look at this new flying creature. We can see that these are not birds, like many, including myself, speculated, but they look a lot more reptilian, with smooth scaly skin and not feathers. They are yellow with green spots and pink undersides, with beady glowing yellow eyes and small antennas on the front of their head. They also have long tails and pretty long legs. Along with the new monsters, we can see in this shot a bunch of broken and wonky towers, seen in many of the monster camps in Breath of the Wild. The layout of them reminding me greatly of the swampy area close to the Lost Woods. Looking closely, we can even see a couple of bokoblins sitting at the top of a couple of the towers. And off to the right, we can see another green whirlwind. I'll talk about these a little bit later, as I do have a couple of new thoughts on them. Moving on, while Hyrule is still covered in darkness, we can see 3 large glowing areas that easily stick out. The one in the very middle of the shot being another one of those interesting patterns that we saw in the last trailer, though this one seems to be an all-new one we have not yet seen. Along with that, we can also see 2 towers. These towers look a lot more like the ones seen in monster camps and are definitely not the Sheikah towers seen in Breath of the Wild. Though with how spread out they are from one another and with how lit up they are, I think it's a safe guess to say that these will be replacing the Sheikah towers from Breath of the Wild, and work as a new mapping location, basically working as the Sheikah towers but with a new coat of paint to fit this game. We then get to look down from one of the sky islands and can see that even from this island there are other floating islands under us. Directly under the island that we look down from is a much smaller floating island that looks to be a lot more square and unnatural looking compared to the one that we're next to. And looking closely, we can see an orange light on the island, a light that looks very similar to some of the lights found on Sheikah technology. So could some of these islands be connected to the Sheikah? In the distance we can also see another floating island, and as we go on you can really start to see that there will be a lot of these floating islands, big and small, all around Hyrule. An interesting detail that you could overlook is the many blue floating orbs around the screen. Could these be to show something of interest being on the island, or simply a little detail in the world? They do remind me a little of the lights that can be found around spirits or around the goddess statues when talking with them in Breath of the Wild. Moving on, we get a look at what looks to be an all-new area, and this area looks like nothing we've seen before in Breath of the Wild's Hyrule, which really gets me wondering, is this on one of the islands? Is this an area in Hyrule that has changed through corruption, or is this even a new underground area? Whichever it is, it looks very cool. Looking around the area, we can see many giant mushroom trees. They're a little similar to the large mushroom structures found in parts of Hyrule, but you can see that these ones look far more organic and less like stone, like those ones seen in Breath of the Wild. Some of these mushrooms even look to grow at different heights, making natural platforms that I'm sure we'll be able to climb. You can see this way off in the background. Along with those, there are also many other plants growing tall, but they all seem to look quite dull and almost dead, perhaps an effect of growing in this location. As even though it is dark, there is what looks to be a constant fog or haze over the area, making it look much more dull and almost dusty. We can see spreading across the ground is possibly more malice, though it doesn't look as thick and gooey as what we've seen before and almost looks dried up. If this is dried malice left from the events of Breath of the Wild, maybe it is the reason that this area is looking so dead. Close to the screen we can see a small group of monsters made up of 4 Lizalfos, 2 on the ground in clear view, 1 on a platform, and 1 seen for a split second hiding just behind the rock with a spear. We can also see a bokoblin who is using a very simple looking hammer, made from a large rock and a stick, to hammer away at some ore that's on the large rock. The little guy also wearing a backpack to hold his tools. It's very cool to see the monsters actually doing more in the overworld than just attacking random NPCs and hanging out together. Seeing them mine and set up a small guard around the working monster is very cool, and makes them feel a lot more natural in the world, like they have to do more to survive, just like the Hylians and other creatures in the land. It does get me wondering though, why are they mining? Do they simply need the resources, or is there perhaps something in the ore more valuable? Looking at the rock the ore is on, we can see a lot of spiral patterns, which could possibly be a way of showing us something important or maybe rare could be found within the ore on the rock. Looking closely at the monsters, you can see a little detail that carries over between all of them: the colour. In Breath of the Wild, the colour of the monsters would show you how dangerous they could be, different coloured monsters having different amounts of health and different amounts of damage. But while all these monsters might just look red at first glance, looking closely you can see small particles coming off of them. These monsters are corrupted, or maybe more likely, empowered by malice. And this probably shows a direct connection and loyalty to Ganondorf. Perhaps that's why they're mining. They're trying to find something specific for Ganondorf. It's also very likely that this malice will make them more dangerous than other monsters. As we've seen in previous trailers, not all monsters have this malice look. Looking just to the right of the monster's mining operations, we can see a group of floating, glowing blue flames. At first, something that could be seen as just a little world detail, but we have seen glowing blue flames like this before, in Twilight Princess. Within Twilight Princess, while in locations of Hyrule covered in twilight, the normal Hylians within the twilight are shown to us as blue flames. These flames essentially being the spirits of the Hylians. Using your senses while in wolf form will show you the physical forms of these blue flames, showing you what Hylians they really are. These flames in the trailer could very well be a little world detail, but with other references to Twilight Princess seen in the other trailers and even within Breath of the Wild, it's quite interesting to see these 12 little blue flames huddled together in the middle of a very dead monster-filled area. Now let's move on to the part of this scene that I'm sure most of you saw right away. The strange giant tree with a glowing core, and the interesting structure in front of it. Let's start with the tree. Well, I say tree, but it's a little hard to tell as we can't see the top, and it's definitely different from the others surrounding it. The bark of the tree to me almost looking like snake skin. The lower portion of the tree and maybe its roots are seen to be wrapped around the glowing core, perfectly holding it in place. But with how interesting this is, there really isn't all that much to say on it. It definitely stands out, but there isn't much to show what it is or what it could be used for. An idea that I have had though is that these trees will work almost as a new sort of tower. If this is an underground area, or even an area in a new world like the Twilight Realm or Dark World, maybe these trees with the glowing cores will be used as landmarks, helping you to not get lost in the darkness. An easy way to find your way around. The structure in front of these trees though, for me, is more interesting than the tree itself. At first I thought it was just some simple old ruins, something we see all over the place in Breath of the Wild. But looking closer, you can see that the structure doesn't seem to be in ruins at all, and almost seems to be in perfect condition. And I can't even be sure that these structures are even stone, as when looking closely, they looked a lot less like ruins, stone walls and pillars, and much more like normal bookcases and shelves. The smallest structure looking almost like a small fireplace. With how dead the land around it seems to be, and with how perfect the condition of this little section looks, it's really quite a contrast and very strange to see in the middle of this already strange and interesting area. A thought I had on what could happen here is a shopkeeper, maybe someone like Beedle, or maybe more fitting to the area, Kilton, could set up shop once we've cleared out the nearby monsters. The shelves later being filled with their wares, and the fireplace now lit to show that they are ready to sell to you. We then move back to a familiar area from Breath of the Wild, looking out over the Great Bridge of Hyrule, with Death Mountain in the background, malice still flowing from the top of it. Hyrule Castle floating in the air can also be seen, with the eruption of malice coming up from under it, and what looks to be another green spiral just in front of it. But without a doubt, the most awesome thing that we can see is this dragon standing on the Great Bridge of Hyrule. And at first glance it may just look like a very awesome yet pretty normal dragon, but looking closer you can see it has 1, 2, 3. This dragon has 3 heads. Could this be the very long awaited return of one of the original bosses from the original Legend of Zelda game, Gleeok? Well, as someone who loves seeing older monsters and bosses brought back and revamped for the modern day, I really hope it is, as I've waited to see Gleeok return for a super long time now. And from this very small clip, even from afar, he looks awesome. It's very likely that Gleeok will be a brand new overworld mini-boss, much like the Hinox and Talus found in Breath of the Wild. And comparing them to this new big boy, well, it kinda makes them look like child's play in comparison. This 3-headed dragon blocking the way on one of the most recognisable areas in Breath of the Wild definitely feels like he's going to put up a challenge, and I hope he does. Being an overworld mini-boss also makes it very likely that we could find other versions of Gleeok around the map. With this one having flaming heads, it could also mean that others could have ice heads or lightning heads, or have more heads, as that was something we could see in the original Zelda game. Oh, and something you do see in some Gleeok fights of the past is that the heads will sometimes detach and fly around, attacking you individually. Now that I'd love to see in Tears of the Kingdom. There's also something that's pretty hard to miss that starts at this part of the trailer, and it's that all new voice. But I'll wait a little bit to talk about that more. We then move to Hateno Village, a place that we should all know very well from Breath of the Wild. We look down from the top of the hill where the ancient tech lab is, and we can see that a couple of things at the lab are no longer there. The furnace that was once outside the lab by the door that we needed to light with the blue flame is no longer outside, and the telescope that was by the edge of the cliff has also been moved. In fact, the lab as a whole looks pretty empty. There's no lights on in or outside of the lab, and just from this small clip it feels that the lab could almost be abandoned. Could Pura and her assistant have left the lab and moved down to the village, or even back to Kakariko? Speaking of the village, it also looks quite dark. The lamps around the town don't seem to be lit, and the location where the blue flame was is also dark. The only lights are coming from a couple of houses, but mainly seen coming from these new strange tent-like structures. We can also see on the left of the village, on one of the cliffs surrounding it, another one of those green whirlwinds, and I think now's a good time to explain what I feel these things will be doing in the game. With the shrines from Breath of the Wild no longer in this game, I feel like these whirlwinds will be replacing them. The shrines were mainly for puzzles, but opening them would mark them on your map and make it so you could teleport to them, becoming another fast travel along with the towers. I feel it's very likely that these whirlwinds will replace the shrines and become a new fast travel. We've seen many dotted all over Hyrule at this point, but one being right next to a town feels like a pretty perfect place for a quick travel location. And like what I've said in other videos, I do still feel that these could be what help us get to the sky at points, or even send us to specific sky islands that will work as new shrine replacements. After this scene, we then see Link, standing in some old ruins staring up at the Blood Moon. And we will see shortly that the Blood Moon seems to be playing a much bigger part within this game. We can also see in this moment off in the distance is a floating island with something hanging down from it. I feel this is very likely a waterfall. In Skyward Sword we could see some waterfalls falling off the side of Skyloft and they looked very similar from afar. Maybe some floating islands could affect the land below in ways like water from waterfalls falling down onto Hyrule and flooding certain areas. We are then shown the Blood Moon again, though much closer. But although we are closer, I have to say the moon also looks a lot bigger in general. Maybe it's now somehow closer to Hyrule, perhaps through Ganondorf's power. In this shot we can also see Hyrule Castle, and while it's only a small part, we can see that it does seem to still be in ruins. Through these clips we also hear the new voice talking to us, saying,
"Rise, rise my servants. Sweep over Hyrule. Eliminate this kingdom and her allies. Leave no survivors!"
Now, unless this game has a new villain that we don't yet know about, I think it's safe to say that this is our very first chance at hearing the voice of Ganondorf himself. And this is a very exciting thing for me as someone whose favourite character is Ganondorf. It's only a small clip, but I cannot wait to hear more from him in the full game. I hope we get a lot more time with him to hear his voice more, and don't just see him at the beginning and the end of the game. Moving on, we then get a full look at Hyrule Castle, the Blood Moon still in the sky above it. And we can definitely tell that not much, if any, work has been done on restoring the castle, as it does seem to still be quite a mess. Though, as we can see, that was likely for the better, as the castle is once again covered in malice, even more than what we saw in Breath of the Wild. One side seems to be almost completely covered. We know that the castle will be floating above Hyrule with malice under it, but I do hope that at some point we'll be able to explore the whole castle, even some areas that were blocked off in Breath of the Wild. We are then shown the moon again, this time clouds of malice shooting out from it in every direction. This moment is extremely similar to one scene in Breath of the Wild when King Rome is talking about what happened in Hyrule 100 years ago. Within that moment we see Calamity Ganon rise and malice flying out to corrupt the Guardians. Though we will see shortly that the malice doesn't seem to corrupt what it touches this time. As the scene moves on, we see the malice falling, and can see that this moment takes place by the Great Plateau, the walls surrounding it clearly visible. Though an interesting thing to point out is by looking at the background we can tell that this is the west side of the plateau, as the area behind it is what would lead to the Gerudo Desert. But unlike in Breath of the Wild, this area is now no longer covered in snow. Could this simply be because Tears of the Kingdom takes place in a different time of the year, or maybe Ganondorf's influence is changing more in Hyrule than we thought? Ganondorf caused global warming. We can also see in this shot another one of the green whirlwinds off in the distance. The next thing we see is very similar to both when we see a boss defeated in Breath of the Wild and also when Zelda defeats Calamity Ganon at the end of the game. Looking within the light, we can see an outline of a possible monster, something that actually resembles Calamity Ganon in its spider form quite a bit, as we can see multiple long guardian legs attached to the main body. If this somehow is Calamity Ganon, it could be apart from a flashback to the events of Breath of the Wild, or perhaps Ganondorf brings back the Calamity and uses it again as a puppet. It would actually be very cool if one of the final bosses of Breath of the Wild ended up being an early boss in Tears of the Kingdom, to really show how powerful Ganon is, but also to show how powerful Link has gotten. We then move on to one of the more simple yet interesting clips from the trailer. It really just seems like a large amount of rock and rubble falling apart. It clearly looks to be somewhere around Death Mountain though, as we can see the lava within the rock. but I'm not sure if this is simply rock falling off a mountain or a wall. To me, it feels like a monster, an Igneo-Talus. We all know the Talus monsters from Breath of the Wild, and I could see a much larger one appear as a boss monster in Tears of the Kingdom. There was already a larger Talus that appeared in the DLC for Breath of the Wild, so an even bigger one would be pretty cool. Another idea is that this could be an all-new monster with rocks on its back. The structure of the rocks do seem to look quite a lot like spikes that could be on a monster's back to me. Perhaps a new Dodongo. We've already seen that Gleeok, a boss from the original Legend of Zelda game, is returning, so it would be very cool if other bosses from that original game returned in other ways. And Death Mountain would definitely be the perfect place to find a Dodongo. There was also that giant footprint in Breath of the Wild found around the mountain that definitely would fit one. Perhaps if this is a Dodongo, it's been asleep under the rock of Death Mountain for a very long time, waiting for Ganon's return, and this moment here is it waking up, moving all of the rock that's now above it. We are then shown a clip that we've seen before in past trailers of Hyrule Castle falling apart. We can guess that this happens as the castle is lifted up. Not too much more to say about this that I haven't already. Moving on, we are then shown the Great Plateau, and some of the surrounding area, as the Blood Moon still sits in the sky. Looking to the right we can see the Temple of Time, and a little to the left in the distance another one of those strange ancient patterns on the ground. It's again hard to tell what this one could be, as we can't see all of it this time. Looking more to the left we can see the Great Bridge of Hylia, and can see at this time that our three-headed friend isn't over there. Looking at the ground on the Great Plateau close to the camera though, we can see that there is also pools of malice on the ground, something we didn't see in the Great Plateau within Breath of the Wild. Ganondorf's power is definitely spreading to parts of the kingdom it didn't reach before. In the next shot we are shown some red bokoblins, the malice that came from the moon smashing down into them and seemingly empowering them. This is also likely how the monsters we saw earlier in the trailer got that red malice glow. I'm guessing that even though these are red bokoblins, the most easy type of bokoblin to fight, with the malice power on them I feel they'll be a lot stronger and more powerful than normal red bokoblins. It's also interesting to point out that these bokoblins seem to have appeared or been summoned by Ganon, as they don't start on the ground, and where they are standing looks to be the top of one of the walls surrounding the Great Plateau. With this and the malice that we saw in the previous clip, it's definitely making me feel that the Great Plateau will not be a safe place to explore. We are then shown even more monsters, a bokoblin, a Lizalfos, a moblin, and two new monsters. A big blin, and what I can only guess to be a Redead. We'll see the big blin a little more later, so I'll talk about that more then, but let's quickly talk about the possible Redead. First, it's lovely to see a classic monster return to the series, as it's one I'm sure all Zelda fans have had some experience with from past games. It's exciting to see it come back. The design is awesome. Although this is a small clip, we can tell it's very skeletal looking, but the mouth area reminds me almost of a bug with the way that it opens sideways. The thought of that gripping down onto Link's head as it grabs onto you is extremely creepy. But with all Redeads, the most important thing is the scream. I hope this Redead will have a awesomely creepy and chilling scream that makes you worried about fighting them. Looking closely at the start of this shot we can also see another moblin and what looks to be another Redead slowly standing up. And looking at the moblin and bokoblin we can see that the horns are different. We've seen that they will have different horns from Breath of the Wild before, but it seems that there will be more than one type. The bokoblin horn has split and become two horns, and the moblin's is more rounded, reminding me a little of a Stygimoloch dinosaur. The Lizalfos though, at least in this shot, doesn't look to have any new changes. We can see though that all of these monsters here, just like the bokoblins before, seem to be getting infused by the malice shot from the moon. Then we are shown a clip of Link riding his horse across Hyrule Field, with Hyrule Castle already floating in the background, malice coming up from under it. Looking closely, it looks like there may even be a small whirlwind of malice close by the castle, maybe a way to block players from getting to Hyrule Castle till later in the game. If you look at the top left, you can also see something pretty interesting up in the sky, a very large whirlwind of clouds. This looks extremely similar to the Thunderhead found in Skyward Sword. If you played that game, you'll know that you're only able to access it once a light shot from Skyloft shoots through and makes a way for us. Inside it, there's a handful of sky islands that we can explore, some very crucial to the story and others just there for side content. It'll be interesting to see what this new Thunderhead will be used for in Tears of the Kingdom, and if inside it there'll be multiple or just a single island, if any. It's also very cool to see more clear references to Skyward Sword in this game, saying so much of it will take place in the sky. Also, the clouds definitely look very ominous hanging there in the sky. The next part of the trailer really had me scratching my head as to what exactly we're being shown. It really is such a strange little clip with not much seemingly happening within it. But after thinking and looking around Breath of the Wild, I believe that this shot is looking down from around Mount Flora into the Tabub grasslands. The rocks on the side of the cliff in the trailer I was able to find in Breath of the Wild and get almost exactly the same shot. But the main reason that I wanted to find this location is to see what this may be. In the middle of the area in the trailer. In Breath of the Wild, there's nothing there, only some trees close by. But there definitely is something there in the trailer. But with how far away it is and with how dusty the area seems to be, it's very hard to tell. Looking at the shape and size though, it could very well be a Molduga, which would be very interesting if it was, saying in Breath of the Wild they were only found in the desert, and this location, while it's close to the desert, had no sand and no sign of Moldugas. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, so do leave your comments down below. We can also see on the left wall a bunch of smoke and dust falling down. It could be that something caused the rocks on the wall to fall, creating this dust, maybe when the earth shook when Hyrule Castle rose, or perhaps something else. A little something to point out though is in Breath of the Wild, this area is actually where we find Ganondorf's horse. This might not have any importance to Tears of the Kingdom at all, but I thought it was kinda cool. We are then shown some very familiar yet new Sheikah technology. With all the trailers we've had so far, the Sheikah tech has been almost completely absent, so it's nice to see that there will be some still around. From the colours on the Sheikah tech being blue, we can tell that this is not corrupted by Ganon's malice like many things were in Breath of the Wild, and this is still under the control of the Sheikah. The part Link stands on reminds me a little of the elevator like one seen in the Sheikah shrines, though this one seems a little bit more primitive, being made mainly of wood. The room that this takes place in is definitely reminiscent of the Divine Beast, which shows that this room could have been made a very long time ago. Looking out through the tiny bit of window that we can see through, it looks to be the outside world, so perhaps this is an entrance to an underground area or maybe some kind of lookout. Then there's the guardian legs which appear from under the platform. My first thought when seeing this and realising that it seemed to be under Sheikah control still was that these guardian legs were a part of some kind of alarm or trap for intruders. Looking at the middle leg, there doesn't seem to be a foot like on the others, but instead some kind of rectangular device. This reminds me a lot of a speaker or maybe even an old microphone. You can even see a pole attached to the same leg, possibly helping to hold it up. Could the Sheikah have gone into hiding, and this be a safety mechanism to keep the hiding place safe? The possible speaker being used as a way to talk from inside the base to see if someone is an intruder before letting them in on the elevator. We then move back to some monsters, and this time we are shown 6 blue bokoblins all wielding shields while waving around clubs. We also get another much better look at the Big Blin, who seems to be the one initiating this attack by blowing a horn. The Big Blins are definitely the leaders of the group of normal bokoblins, and maybe even other monsters like Lizalfos and Moblins. It's nice to see these big guys again as they've only turned up before in Spirit Tracks. We can see the Big Blin has orange paint covering its body, a collection of skulls around its neck, and even a crown made up of either bones or horns, with what looks to be the end of an axe in the centre. The body paint gives me big Wind Waker vibes, and I'm very excited to fight these guys in game. I hope they put up a challenge. Looking at the group, we can also see puffs of malice around them, almost like they've only just been created by Ganondorf, or maybe only just infused with malice, like what we have seen before in the trailer. We can also see on the left side some large black blocks which look quite out of place. I believe these blocks have fallen from some of the sky islands above, as a little later we'll see this actually happening. And following on from this, we are then once again introduced to the Hinox, one of the overworld mini-bosses from Breath of the Wild. When it comes to its appearance, it doesn't look too different from what it did in Breath of the Wild. It does now have what looks to be a log on its head covering its horn though. We can also see it wearing a necklace. Hinox did wear these in Breath of the Wild. They would sometimes have weapons like swords and bows attached to them that you could obtain after defeating them. And sometimes they would even have orbs to shrines attached to them. What we can see attached to the necklace now though is all new, a strange glowing green crystal. I'm guessing that this item will be some way important, maybe working as a way to open a new area like the Sheikah orbs from Breath of the Wild. It does look quite large as it swings around the Hinox's neck though, so it may be used for something close by. It does clearly glow, as we can see at times the light coming from it on the ground, so maybe these crystals could also be used as a light source within dark areas. Speaking of the area this moment takes place in, it's clearly a cave. We've known of caves from the very first trailer of the game, but to actually see gameplay within them now is so exciting, as caves was one of the things I really missed in Breath of the Wild. Something not related to Breath of the Wild that this moment actually reminded me of though, was a moment from the Twilight Princess beta trailer, where an early version of Gohma is seen chasing Link through a cave in a very similar way to how this Hinox is now chasing him. We then see Link again, jumping off the top of Mount Rome and using his power glider to fly out over the Ceres Scablands. From here you can see Satori Mountain along with the dueling peaks off in the distance. In the sky are many different types of floating islands all across it. They all seem very blurry, which I feel has been done to 1 show that they're very high up in the sky, and 2 not be too distracting when playing in Hyrule. The most interesting island to me in this group is the giant cube. It definitely sticks out and feels the most man-made out of all of the ones in this shot. On the right of Link, on the ground, in the distance, are what looks to be more of those black blocks, what I guessed have fallen from the sky. I'm sure we'll be seeing these all across Hyrule. Maybe they'll help in indicating a certain type of island above us. As the clip moves on and we see Link jump, we can see that the power glider now has some tassels attached to it. And with some images released by Nintendo, we've seen that using Amiibo will allow us to change the design of the power glider. It makes me wonder if there'll be more designs that we'll be able to find for it from NPCs in the game. At this time, we can also see at the very top of the screen a huge island, along with next to it a very tall island. The larger one really makes me think of Skyloft from Skyward Sword. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, it would be really cool to find a ruined Skyloft in this game, somewhere up in the sky. The tall island next to it really makes me think that this type of island will be more puzzle based, something that we'll need to climb up or down to fully explore and find whatever goodies may be hiding in or on it. We then see Link again riding his horse across Hyrule Field, Hyrule Castle and Death Mountain visible in the background. Now at first I thought, and from what I've seen from others they also thought, that this was maybe a Lionel. But it's a rock. Yeah, it's just another rock. It definitely looks like it could be something due to the lighting, but yeah, it's just a rock. And I'm kind of ashamed to say how long I was staring at this stupid rock for, so I won't. But there is something pretty interesting about this clip. At first the field looks to be just normal grass, but looking again you can see the different coloured grass along with the normal stuff. This different coloured grass is actually one of the large ancient images that we've seen from afar before. It's really cool seeing it up close, and seeing Link ride his horse across it really shows again just how big and how much space these will take up. I wonder if they'll show up on the map, and if looking at all of them together maybe shows some bigger image created across the kingdom. We are then shown another shot of the flying enemies, this time flying around while holding onto Bokoblins. This is something that we've seen before with Kagaroks in the Wind Waker, as they are seen within that game carrying monsters into battle. In fact, one of the very first fights within that game is against a couple of Bokoblins who are dropped in by a couple of Kagaroks. This, I feel, is going to be a lot of fun when it comes to combat, especially if they can also carry other monsters in. We are going to get a lot of fights in this game with different types of monsters at the same time, making us need to pay attention to the ones on the ground and the ones in the air. It feels a lot more like combat you'd see within games like Wind Waker or Twilight Princess. While the monsters are clearly the main part of this scene, there is something very interesting that you may not have noticed at first. On the right of the scene is the Typhlo Ruins, the area within Breath of the Wild that was completely covered in darkness. But now in this trailer, it's no longer covered, and you can see not only the trees, but some of the ruins within it. This place was full of Zonai ruins, and with it pretty much all but confirmed with how important they are to the new game, it's very interesting that these ruins are now no longer covered in darkness. Could they lead to an all-new area? You can also see on the lower right another one of these blocks that I think came from the sky, but looking a little to the left of it is something quite small and a little hard to tell exactly what it is, but to me it looks almost like a boat and a paddle. If I'm right, this would be incredibly exciting, as it would likely mean that those boats would replace the rafts found in Breath of the Wild. These would likely be a lot more easier to move and control and could be found in many locations like lakes and rivers, and also the ocean. It would make exploring these areas, getting chests and fighting monsters that are within the water far easier. I would very much love to see this be true, as I would love to sail around the rivers and oceans looking for treasure and having my little Wind Waker moment. Moving on, we are then shown a group of moblins, 2 red and 1 blue. We can see that again they have new horns, the red ones having the dome-like ones that I mentioned before, and the blue moblin having a double split horn like the Bokoblins that I mentioned before. There isn't too much more to say on this clip, apart from that we can see Mount Lanayru in the background, and as the camera pans around we can see a stone skull with some wooden platforms attached to it, indicating that these moblins are a part of a monster camp that Link has walked into. We then get to a very exciting part of this trailer, showing off yet another new monster. This creature definitely looks man-made, possibly the Zonai's version of the Guardians. We can see it's made out of some type of stone made into bricks, and being held together by a green light. There's a large block of green light visible on the creature, and this is very likely its weak point. It slams down attempting to attack Link, and as it does so you can see the blocks it's made up with shake. It would be very cool to see this monster take different forms, with the blocks coming together in different ways, and the weak point being in different spots each time. This is also, I believe, our first proper fight shown on a floating island. The island itself seems to be mainly made of stone, but with grass and trees still growing on it. We can also see many other floating islands out in the background. I have to say, I love how this part looks. The sky islands have this lovely lighting and it makes them look so warm and inviting. Though, I'm sure that's not the same for all of them. After this we then see Ganondorf, and this is the best new look at him that we have gotten in quite a while. In this scene we see him slowly pulling himself up, while malice seeps from his chest. This is actually the exact same place that the spirit hand was holding him in the very first trailer, and so this moment definitely takes place after it's removed itself from him, showing that it's very likely that this hand indeed was the seal literally holding Ganondorf down. A clip of Hyrule Castle is then quickly shown, the malice starting to push the castle up. I'm guessing that this moment is tied to the one before. There is also another shot of Ganondorf after this, standing on the platform we first saw him on in the first trailer. He raises his arms as the platform seems to rise, the area around crumbling. Again, very likely that this and the moment with Ganondorf before take place at the same time, likely when he's been set free, his power returning and his malice flowing out to destroy the surrounding area. It was theorized from the start by myself and many others, but it definitely seems that Ganondorf was located under Hyrule Castle. This little moment with Ganondorf then finishes with a close-up on his face, his eyes opening to show them full of malice and rage. Then we move from the rage of Ganondorf to a very calm moment with Link, which gives me Skyward Sword vibes, as all you can see is him and the sky behind him. We are then shown what Link is looking at. He looks down over the kingdom of Hyrule from one of the Sky Islands. We can see again Hyrule Castle along with much of Hyrule and many of the Sky Islands. We however can't see Death Mountain, and that's because we are pretty much right above it in this moment. Looking to the right, we can see a large amount of malice that looks to be coming out of nowhere, but this is likely malice spewing out of the top of Death Mountain. While it's pretty hard to point out really any key areas of Hyrule from this far away, there is something that caught my eye. Over here is what looks to be a light coming up from the ground. This could be one of the new towers that we saw at the start of the trailer. This light definitely showing how easy it will be to find them from so far away. We'll actually see another one of these towers in just a second. As these scenes are shown, we then hear Zelda saying,
"But Link, I am not sure you'll be able to stop him."
Definitely giving the feeling that this is Ganondorf like we've never seen him before, the most powerful he has ever been. We then see Link falling from one of the Sky Islands down to Hyrule. As he does, you can see in the background what looks to be more waterfalls coming from some of the Sky Islands. As the camera moves behind Link, we can see another large malice pool as well as another one of the towers surrounded by light. Right before we move on to the next section, you can also see a cylindrical structure on the bottom left, though again from here it's quite hard to tell what it may be. Next we see another shot of Link exploring Hyrule, this time walking across it. We can see another one of those interesting new patterns on the ground, and from this perspective we can see just how big some of these are and how much room they'll take up, as it takes up almost the entire middle of this section of the field. Sadly again though, I can't tell what this one might be. There is actually quite a lot of little things dotted around this shot. The closest is what looks to be a huge monster camp. There are many skull camps that look to line the left side of the screen, even with a brand new type of skull camp being seen, one made up of 3 skulls on top of each other. Maybe this is where we could find the big blins. Staying over on the left side is another tower. We can really see the shape of this one a lot more from this angle, and it really looks quite cool. It could be a different tower, but I'm guessing this is one of the same towers that I've pointed out in the video already. Moving over a little to the right is what looks to be another large rectangular rock that's crashed down to the earth, likely another type of sky block. Moving all the way to the right we can see another tower, and also hiding in the trees what looks to be a stable. The top of the stable, the horse head, poking out from the top of the trees. We then move on to some combat, this time with one of the new flying creatures. In this, we're shown just how big these guys are, but along with that we can also see Link using an all new type of arrow to take them down. And this new arrow seems to be some type of homing arrow, as we can see Link shoot just to the right of the monster and the arrow quickly change direction to make sure it still hits. The tip of the arrow looks almost like a balloon, but we can tell from the glowing green light that this is some kind of sky weapon. It could also be that these arrows, and maybe new other arrows, could replace ancient arrows from Breath of the Wild. We can also see another sky block that's fallen to the ground, but looking at the mountain behind Link, we can see a hole in the side of it. Something that definitely would not have been there in Breath of the Wild. This is one of the entrances to the caves, and it's very cool to see that these will not just be holes on the ground or on ground level, but will also be found in the walls of cliffs and mountainsides. As the monster is killed, the camera zooms out and you can also see behind the tree on the right some kind of structure or building. Also, you can see as the arrow hits the monster, the balloon on the end pops while hitting the monster, and what looks to be almost confetti or glitter comes out of the pop balloon. Next we move on to what looks to be Death Mountain, the hot springs visible below. In this shot we can see Link shield surfing down a minecart rail onto a base of monsters, 2 blue bokoblins and 1 red moblin. We can see that they have placed a barricade in the middle of the track, and have also removed all the carts and put them off to the side. There is also some wheels laying around here, but I'll talk about them a little bit later. We can also see a giant red stone in the side of the mountain, which definitely looks important. Perhaps we'll be able to mine it or bomb it to remove it. We now return to the sky and can see Link interacting with a puzzle, which really reminds me of some of the puzzles that we would find in shrines in Breath of the Wild. Link moves the objects to move the larger platform, and we can see that Link is doing this with the use of his right arm, now infused with the green magic. I had already guessed a while ago, but it's pretty clear now that Link's arm will be replacing the Sheikah slate, and all abilities we get in the game will be used with the magic arm. As the mechanism moves right before the end of the clip, you can also see what looks to be maybe a chest attached by a rope hanging off the underside of the structure. Moving it in the right way will likely give us access to get to it, or at least make it easier to get from another location. Moving on, we're back within a cave, this time fighting a stone talus. Interesting how overworld mini-bosses from Breath of the Wild have only really been shown underground in Tears of the Kingdom so far. We can see that this stone talus is one made of luminous stone, from the ore on the top of its body. Looking just to the left though, we can see a huge deposit of luminous stone in the back, coming out of the rock. The most we have seen together in such a large cluster, as in Breath of the Wild, ores could only really be found in individual pieces. I wonder if this can actually be mined or if it is there for simply decoration. We can also see under the luminous stone, and also over to the far left before the camera moves, some small white glowing stones, perhaps a new type of material. Looking at Link, we can also see an all-new weapon. Well, it may not be entirely new, as we've seen something very similar in an older trailer. That one being attached to a shield and shooting out fire, while this one seems to be attached to a pole and shoots out bombs, or some kind of other explosive. We can see that even when shooting from the new weapon, Link does still attack with the weapon itself, as when it hits the ground we can see it does damage. Maybe these dragon heads will be able to be attached to different weapons to create all new ones, doing new interesting attacks like shooting fire or shooting bombs. We are then introduced to an all new figure. This could very well be Zelda, but the face is obscured so we can't be entirely sure. I feel this could be Zelda though, in a brand new outfit that relates her more back to the goddess Hylia, as we can see the jewellery fits with the ancient style of what we have seen Link wearing at times with his green outfit. We can see the jewellery around her wrists, her shoulders, and down the front of her dress. The dress itself having a blue-green panel down the front. The lighting makes this moment feel very special and almost dreamlike, and from what we can see behind the figure, it looks like they could be within a temple or in front of some kind of statue or fountain. We see the figure reach out, and it perfectly transitions to the next moment of the trailer where we see them taking hands with Link. I'm really getting the feeling that Link went in his green outfit, and this possible Zelda could be connected to the past, more specifically what happened 10,000 years ago, and it's going to be really cool to see these moments explained fully within the game. We then see Link back in his champion's tunic, looking at his hand. The way it's framed reminds me of how we were introduced to memories in Breath of the Wild. Could this be him coming back from reliving a memory of the spirit hand? We can once again see in the background many islands in the sky. I have to say, I do like that we have been shown that there will be many islands to explore, though haven't been shown exactly much of what we can expect to find on them. I do hope that remains a secret till the game comes out. We can also see in this shot a very good and clear view of the new item on Link's hip. We could see this in moments from the last trailer, but this is the best look we've gotten so far. I feel this will be connected to the hand. The vials on it could represent the amount of magic that the hand has, and what abilities you'll be able to use with it. Maybe getting more vials as the game goes on will let you use magic longer, or let you use it faster. I also feel it could be used for the main thing we'll be collecting through this game, like medallions or Triforce shards from games past. Maybe this time it will be the tears that the name of the game is taken from. Now we get to see something I don't think anyone expected. In the first clip, we see Link back on the Great Plateau, and we can see more malice in the background. But the main thing about this moment is Link using his hand to pull up a wheel, and we can quickly see what this wheel is used for in the next clip. This wheel is used to make a car to traverse Hyrule. Well, not exactly a car, but that's really the only thing I can think of to use here. We actually saw some of these wheels earlier in the trailer when Link was shield surfing down the minecart rail on Death Mountain, so it seems that the items to make these contraptions will be found all over Hyrule. We can see what seems to be powering this car is a bright green crystal, so maybe that green crystal we saw around the Hinox's neck earlier in the trailer is one of the same things. And getting it will allow us to make another machine. In this clip with the car, we can also see a moblin in the background on the right and a Hinox in the background on the left. And just before the clip moves on to the next one, as the camera turns, we can see another tower on the right side of the screen. We then move on and can see even more of what we'll be able to make, a hot air balloon, taking us high up into the sky. The green magic wrapping itself around the hot air balloon, likely being what is also lifting it up. I'm sure I'll be spending hours travelling around Hyrule in one of these. In this scene, along with the Sky Islands, we can also see out in the ocean a normal island. I don't think this is eventide due to that being much lower down on the map from where this clip takes place. It could be one past the barrier of Hyrule, only there for decoration, but it would be really cool if there was one or two more smaller islands out in the ocean that we could now explore. Moving on, we get a look at another way these mechanical parts can be used, in the form of some kind of hovercraft. The green magic we saw before on the hot air balloon now also wrapping itself around the craft, holding it together. And I'm also guessing from this that the giant glider we saw in the last trailer was also another thing that we could make with these parts. I wonder how many more things we'll be able to make and if it will stick to just transportation. I would love to be able to make a boat so I can sail around the sea. We can also get another good look at some islands in the sky and what looks to be more waterfalls coming off the side of some of them. Definitely the most interesting one in this view for me is the giant orb. I'm guessing whatever is on that island is actually inside it. We then finish off with Link once again riding his horse across Hyrule Field. We see the sky islands above, two towers, one in the centre of the shot and one off to the right. We can also see on the left a pool of malice, and this stuff looks very active. The smoke from it rises up and around it. Something that might be concerning, as very close to that we can see a tent. There's a flag outside of the tent along with what looks to be some shelving. This is very likely some kind of outpost, maybe similar to the stables that we found in Breath of the Wild. Maybe we'll be able to buy and sell stuff to the people who live in this tent. Or perhaps they'll give a new service not seen in Breath of the Wild. I also find it quite cool to see a tent in the middle of Hyrule Field, as in Breath of the Wild there were not many people brave enough to travel through, let alone set up camp with all the monsters and especially guardians roaming around. We can also see here a block falling from the sky, a trail of green light following it. There are definitely parts of the Sky Islands falling from above, and from what we've seen throughout this trailer, they're falling all over Hyrule. We can even see some large blocks have fallen very close to the tent. These falling blocks could be another reason why these people are in a tent. Maybe blocks have fallen and destroyed some of the outposts and even villages around Hyrule, making it so people have chosen to travel around more than stay in one spot and risk getting crushed. Looking just behind the large group of falling blocks, we can see another glowing green light, maybe from another block that has only recently hit the ground. But wait, there's a little more after this. We see Link face to face with Ganondorf, malice coming from Ganon's chest, the hand likely just letting go. We can see Link holding his right arm with his left. His right arm now looking incredibly burned, most likely from the malice. We can see though that he still holds the Master Sword in his right hand, the sword glowing, even now also being covered in malice itself. The malice from Ganon then rises and looks to try and get another attack on Link, but before it does, we see Link turn and drop the Master Sword, leaving it behind with Ganondorf. He drops the sword and leaps towards Zelda, who is now falling, trying to grab her while Zelda's voice in the trailer says,
Please, Lend him your power.
Very likely asking the goddess Hylia, or even the three golden goddesses, Nehru, Din and Ferori, to lend Link power to stop Ganondorf, as this time Ganondorf is the strongest we have ever seen him. The trailer then reminds us when we can expect the game. May 12th, only a few months away. And so that's my breakdown for the newest trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. When I started this, I actually thought it would be shorter than my last one. There was a lot here, but at first I didn't think there was too many new little details to talk about. Seems I was very wrong. I'm sure even though I combed through all this trailer multiple times, there was still something small that I missed. So if there was anything you noticed that I didn't, or you have any thoughts and theories about what we saw in the trailer, do let me know in the comments below. I really hope that you've all enjoyed this video. It takes a lot of time to look through these trailers and write all of the little things that I find down for you guys. So if you have enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like. They are the quickest and easiest way to show me that you have enjoyed the content that I've made, and it does help me out in the algorithm. And if you're new around here, why not subscribe for more Zelda content? With Tears of the Kingdom getting ever closer, there will be a lot to talk about both before and after the game's release, along with talking about other Zelda games as well. I do a little bit of everything as long as it's kind of related to Zelda in some way, so I'm sure there'll be something I make that you will like. Thank you all very much for making it to the end of this very long analysis video. It really does mean a lot, so thank you so much. I hope you've all enjoyed, and I shall see you all in the next video. Bye!